My name is Valentina Ahn. When I joined Orb Strategies, I didn't want to shine. I wanted to make sense. I graduated with honors in international relations, interned on 3 continents, learned 5 languages, and built a solid reputation as a senior analyst. But inside the mirrored walls of the global consultancy firm, where egos speak louder than reports, that's rarely enough. Women like me, daughters of immigrants, too sober to be seen as charismatic and too assertive to be relegated to support roles, are often positioned as silent side characters in stories told by others. When I received the email with the subject line Support Mission, Dubai, Strategic Meeting with Asmara Holdings, I immediately understood the subtext. I wasn't invited. I was sent. As support. As technical backup. The protagonist would be Patrick Klein, the European director known for leading major mergers, always accompanied by inside jokes and polished presentations. My role? To make sure everything ran smoothly behind the scenes. After all, I was the best at aligning the numbers with the right tone of speech, his own words. On the flight, Patrick reviewed the slides without asking for my input. I had already revised those projections 3 times. I knew that the proposal he intended to present ignored the cultural and regulatory nuances of the Arab group we were trying to attract. But when I tried to comment, he patted my shoulder and said, "Relax, Val. You've already worked your magic." In the meeting room, Patrick started out confident. But it quickly became clear that the executives from Asmara Holdings weren't convinced. Their CEO, a calm man named Farid Al-Karim, watched in silence, as if waiting for something deeper than a rehearsed pitch. When Patrick stumbled over a question about logistical implications in Asian ports, he looked at me, and I stepped in. I explained the bottlenecks precisely, suggested viable solutions based on real data, and gave examples of successful integrations in other markets with similar regulations. Farid made a subtle gesture for me to continue. Patrick gave a sheepish smile. I kept going. For 40 minutes, I led the conversation as if we were alone in the room. In the end, Farid reached out his hand to me and said, "Miss Ahn, the proposal only stands with your leadership. If we move forward, I want you as our direct point of contact." Patrick tried to jump in, but it was too late. The table had already understood. On the way back, in the silence of the car, he muttered, "I should have let you lead from the start." I didn't reply. I was too busy mentally reorganizing the contract terms, this time with my name at the front. Because in that moment, for the first time, I understood it was never about shining. It was about taking the space that was always mine. Being sent to observe an international meeting was, in practice, a euphemism. I knew that. It was the polite way of saying, "Stay quiet, watch, and bring the coffee if needed." But I went. Not because I accepted the role, but because I saw beyond it. The invitation came with little context, just a message from my boss saying I would accompany the Ryzen Tech delegation to Tokyo for meetings with a Japanese company called Kenshiro Robotics. "A learning opportunity," he wrote. The subtext was clear. It wasn't my time, nor my place. On the plane, I reviewed every project document, even though I wasn't officially on the strategic committee. I memorized each line of the integration plan, every clause of the preliminary contract, and studied Kenshiro's corporate culture. I knew that, for them, hierarchy and attentive listening were fundamental. So I came prepared to observe with precision, but also to speak up with respect if the opportunity arose. I didn't wear heels. I chose a minimalist, elegant outfit and a jade charm bracelet my grandmother had given me, a symbol of courage and balance. Upon arrival, the Ryzen delegation consisted of 3 men, 2 sales directors, and an external consultant who loved to interrupt. During the first meeting, I quickly noticed the Japanese team's discomfort with the consultant's intrusive tone. He talked too much, laughed at inappropriate times, and ignored the silences that, in their culture, signify thoughtful reflection. It was clear the dialogue was breaking down. On the second day, the negotiation stalled. Kenshiro wanted a flexible partnership model, while Ryzen insisted on rigid terms. The Japanese executives began speaking among themselves in their own language, visibly frustrated. My colleagues didn't understand a word, and they were losing control of the conversation. Then, in a moment of pause, I calmly asked for permission. In Japanese, I thanked them for their hospitality and asked if I could try to summarize the points of tension. There was silence. Then the Kenshiro director nodded. I carefully explained how we could adjust the implementation milestones to respect both teams' pace. I proposed a co-development phase with staggered deliverables and a cultural clause in the contract, providing for intercultural alignment sessions. The Japanese listened. For the first time, there were smiles. The tone shifted. A new meeting was scheduled for the next morning, without the consultant. As we left, the Kenshiro director said, "You listen before speaking. That's rare." The next morning, I returned to the room with revised terms, a bilingual document I had printed myself, and a realistic timeline. We led a listening session, where each side shared concerns and perspectives. I mediated. What was meant to be a support role became the backbone of the negotiation. On the final day, the contracts were signed. And to everyone's surprise, Kenshiro requested that my name be listed as the primary point of contact for the partnership. My boss, back in New York, received the news along with the final terms. He called me in shock. "What did you do?" I simply replied, "What you told me to do. Observe." But I observed with intention. The following week, I was promoted, not by him, but by the company's president. I was no longer just support. I was the architect of the new deal worth millions. And I was still wearing the same jade bracelet. During the return flight, I realized something had changed. My phone buzzed with messages from the team, but they were different now. No more "send the reports," "prepare the room," or "booking confirmed." Instead, "You shined. The client praised your clarity. Thank you for saving the day." For the first time, I felt I wasn't just behind the scenes, I was center stage. When I arrived at the office, the energy was different. People looked at me with quiet respect, as if they were recalibrating my place on the board. But the most striking moment was still to come. The international client sent a formal letter of appreciation to the board, highlighting the intelligence, sensitivity, and technical expertise demonstrated by Ms. Ahn. They used my name. My name. The CEO called me in for a private conversation. I thought it would be just to thank me personally, maybe even offer a symbolic bonus. But he made me an offer to officially lead the partnership division of the project, coordinating the next cycles of negotiation and local adaptation. My response was direct. I accept. But I want to build my own team. People who understand cultural nuance, who speak more than one language, who listen beyond the business pitch. He hesitated for a few seconds, then smiled. "Do it your way, Valentina. You've shown you understand the game." I built a diverse team. I recruited a Filipino intercultural consultant, a Japanese-Brazilian analyst specialized in international compliance, and a young Syrian woman who modeled processes focused on minority inclusion. In just a few months, our approach made the client triple the contract, expanding it to other countries in Asia and Africa. Meanwhile, some of the executives who once ignored me began trying to get closer. They came with belated compliments, invitations for coffee, comments on how they had always seen potential. I smiled politely, but I didn't forget. During the quarterly meeting with the board, I was called to present our progress. I spoke for 20 minutes with slides, yes, but also with human stories. The impact of our model in small communities, the cultural adaptations that reduced user rejection rates by 57%, the real connection between service and sensitivity. When I finished, one of the board members, a veteran in the field, murmured, "It's rare to see strategy and empathy in the same person." And that was when I understood. I wasn't just leading a contract. I was redesigning the very concept of representation in international business. The following week, I received an invitation to speak at the Global Conference on Ethical Expansion in Emerging Markets. My name appeared on the program among UN specialists and founders of impact-driven startups. While preparing my talk, I opened an old notebook. On the cover, years ago, I had written, almost as a whispered act of faith, "One day, your voice will be unmistakable." I closed my eyes, smiled, and kept writing. The global conference wasn't just an opportunity, it was a turning point. The night before my talk, I walked behind the scenes of the convention center in Copenhagen, watching sound engineers adjust microphones, interpreters sync up headsets, and volunteers align chairs. I had walked those same halls before during other events, carrying folders for executives, checking schedules, fixing last-minute details. But now, my name was printed boldly on the badge, and an assistant waited for me to review my agenda. On the morning of the presentation, I took a deep breath before stepping on stage. I had chosen not to use PowerPoint, just my voice and a few projected images, scenes from the communities we served, snippets of real testimonials about cultural adaptation, maps that shifted depending on perspective. I opened with a personal memory, how I grew up between two languages and two worldviews, and how that taught me that true success in international negotiations doesn't come from convincing, but from connecting. As I spoke, I saw the expressions in the room change. From skepticism to curiosity. From curiosity to emotion. I told them how our team had transformed a technical contract into a long-term relationship built on listening and reciprocity. I showed that numbers grow when people are fully respected. The room gave me a standing ovation. Many attendees approached me afterward, proposing partnerships, requesting interviews, offering unexpected collaborations. But one of the most symbolic encounters was with an executive from the company where I had once started as an assistant. She walked over, visibly surprised. "Valentina? Oh my God. I remember you from that meeting in Tokyo. Weren't you the one who brought the coffee while we discussed budgets?" I smiled kindly. "And now we're discussing how to expand that budget into 10 countries with positive local impact." She laughed, a bit awkwardly. We shook hands. Returning home after that conference felt like shedding an old skin. My inbox was full. Invitations from universities, foundations, incubators. I got a call from the company's president, inviting me to take on a new role, Chief Cultural Innovation Officer, a position that didn't even exist before, created from the transformation we had set in motion. "Valentina, you've shown that it's not enough to expand territory. We need to expand mindset. You've changed the way we operate, and we need that at the core of our decisions." I accepted, with one condition, to keep my team fully autonomous and establish a mentorship program for professionals from marginalized backgrounds within the company. This wouldn't be a symbol. It would be a structure. The following months were intense. We created local research hubs, developed intercultural implementation guides, and mapped patterns of invisible exclusion in internal processes. I reviewed hiring policies, proposed changes in communication campaigns, and encouraged the formation of horizontal networks of professional support. For the first time, employees from different countries began to see their contexts not as obstacles, but as resources. The former director who had once sent me to assist at the very beginning now worked in a side department. Quiet. Nearly invisible. Our interactions were limited to formal greetings in large meetings. But one day, after I presented the results of our new inclusive expansion program, he stopped me in the hallway. "I underestimated you. Back then, I thought you were just a hardworking assistant. Now I see you were seeing what none of us could." "You didn't see it, but you weren't alone in that," I replied. "The structure was designed to make us invisible. I just stopped asking for permission to exist." He nodded, and we walked in opposite directions down the corridor. At the end of that quarter, an internal event celebrated the year's most meaningful milestones. There were LED panels, tribute videos, applause, champagne glasses lifted in the main auditorium. Then they called my name. The award was symbolic, innovation with purpose. But what moved me most was the video that played beforehand, testimonials from employees around the world, thanking us for the chance to be heard. A young Kenyan woman, a junior developer, said, "For the first time, someone from headquarters wanted to know how we say trust in our language. That changed everything." An indigenous employee in Mexico said, "The new process made me feel like part of the company, not just a visitor." I watched with tears in my eyes. And at the end, I simply said into the microphone, "Thank you. But know this. This is not an end. It's a beginning. And no one here needs permission to keep transforming." The following week, I received a proposal from the very Fortune 100 company that had once inspired us in our early years. They wanted a consulting partnership to redesign their international expansion programs using our methodology. Ironic. The same model I had once drafted in the silence of a support room, translating ideas into code, hidden behind someone else's badge. We signed the contract. And in that final meeting, I led the negotiation. With my name on the cover, with my team by my side, with a firm gaze but no arrogance. The assistant serving coffee that day looked at me with a smile of recognition. And I thought about leaving her a message. Never think you're just watching. You're studying the game. And maybe, without realizing it, you're already about to lead it. The day of the conference arrived. The event's main hall was vast, with circular stands and a spotlighted stage in the center, as if inviting each speaker to be seen without filters. There were global leaders, impact fund investors, corporate ethics specialists. My name appeared on the digital panel among the day's main highlights, and a QR code linked to a summary of my journey titled, From Support to Leadership, Negotiations with Cultural Awareness. Before stepping on stage, I took a deep breath, remembering all the years when my role was to check if there was water on the table for other speakers. Now, it was my voice that would open the second day of the event. I began with a story. Not with data or indicators, but with a memory, the time I was sent as support to an international meeting and ended up leading the company's most important deal that quarter. I spoke about the subtle barriers that aren't in the manuals, like being called girl by executives who had never prepared to be led by someone like me. I spoke about active listening, presence, competence built in silence. The difference between holding a position and having a voice. At the end of the presentation, instead of rehearsed applause, there was a brief pause. The kind where the audience is processing something deeper than they expected. Then came the applause, strong, prolonged, sincere. People stood up. And I knew, right then, there was no turning back. I was no longer the exception. I was now a reference. In the following days, the invitations multiplied. A European think tank wanted me to help structure a module on negotiation with geopolitical sensitivity. A network of Latin American startups offered a partnership to train emerging leaders. But one invitation, in particular, made my heart skip a beat. It was from the university where I had studied on a full scholarship. The same place where, once, a professor had suggested I give up on the humanities and focus on technical roles, more appropriate for someone like you. The invitation was to return as a visiting professor, to teach a course on negotiation strategies with cultural equity and ethics. I accepted. In the weeks that followed, I balanced my routine between the company and the university module. I reconnected with former professors, now as colleagues. I saw students from diverse backgrounds recognize themselves in the stories I shared. I realized then that my mission had grown. It was no longer just about closing deals, it was about opening paths. Meanwhile, at the company, the team I had formed was becoming a global reference. Other branches requested our model and wanted to implement our methods. The board called me in to discuss a new project, creating an internal training academy for multicultural leadership. The name? The Valentina Ahn program. I'll only accept, I said, if the name is collective. Project Intersections. Because no one gets here alone. Because this path was woven by many invisible hands. They agreed. At the Academy's inauguration, I invited my mother. We sat in the front row. During the ceremony, one of the graduates shared how the mentorship she received had changed how she saw herself in the corporate world. And then she said, "The first time I heard Valentina speak, I felt like my story could work too." She didn't say it would be easy. She said it would be possible. I looked at my mother, who squeezed my hand. Her eyes were full of restrained tears. She whispered in Korean, "You have become a voice." In that moment, everything made sense. It wasn't about being seen. It was about making sure others could be seen too. Months later, I got an unexpected call. The company where I started as an assistant wanted to hire our team for an organizational transformation process. I chuckled quietly, remembering the first ID badge I wore, where my name barely fit in the rectangle. Now, that name led an entire consultancy. During the alignment meeting, the current CEO of that former company, who had replaced the old director, turned to me and said, "I must admit, It's unsettling to realize we let someone with your vision go. I calmly replied, "You didn't lose me. You ignored me. But I moved forward anyway." And I did. Today, I lead negotiations across 4 continents. I manage a team of over 30 nationalities. I teach, I learn, I listen. And I still write my notes by hand before important meetings. It's my ritual, my anchor, because despite everything, I'm still that woman who was once sent just to assist, who quietly listened to every detail, who turned every slight into structure. They sent me to observe, and I ended up leading the future.